A brave band of regular GIs take the last significant bridge standing over the River Rhine and open the gateway into the heartland of the Third Reich. As told by their commanding officer, 2nd Lieutenant Karl Timmerman, and 3 of his men critical to the action. They must storm a bridge bristling with machine guns and laced with explosives primed to blow them and the huge structure to smithereens. By the end of this day, they will have hastened the end of the war. Remagen, Germany. A company of men of the 27th Armored Infantry Battalion, the foot soldiers of the 9th Armored Division, emerges from dense woods. They are just outside the picture postcard town that sits on the banks of the River Rhine. At a bend in the road, the GIs are met with an awesome sight. The Ludendorff Railroad Bridge. And it's still standing. For 5 years, Hitler's forces occupied Europe and dominated the world. But in the 9 long months since the mass Allied landings on D-Day, his armies have been relentlessly battered back through northern France and into Germany. But now that push has been stopped dead at the River Rhine. Every significant bridge along 800 miles of this mighty natural obstacle has been blown. Just 1,000 yards of water presents the Allies with their hardest task of all: to strike at the heart of the Third Reich and finish the war. But first, they must cross this river.
The Rhine is the last great obstacle before Germany itself. Once the Allies got over the Rhine, there was nothing to stop them on their way to Berlin.
Leading the company of men from the 27th is 2nd Lieutenant Karl Timmerman. This 22-year-old who had grown up in West Point took command of Company A on March 6, 1945, the night before this operation. It was a massive irony that he was born in Germany, less than 100 miles from Remagen. His father served in the U.S. Army occupation forces in World War I, but had deserted his post in 1919. Following a childhood of taunts about his father's desertion, young Karl had a point to prove when he entered military service.
I told them, I'm gonna make it right again.
And now the rookie lieutenant has been given the perfect opportunity to prove himself. Timmerman's orders are to mop up the German forces remaining on the west side of the river. First, he must clean enemy resistance out of the town of Remagen. Then he is to secure and hold the bridgehead so that an armored division can be brought up to take the crossing. Timmerman and his men will have to face the fact that the Germans will have almost certainly packed the bridge full of demolition charges, ready to blow it up in the face of capture. He orders his men to move out. In a half-track behind him is 2nd Lieutenant Jim Burrows, the first man from Jersey City to volunteer to serve in World War II. A former clerk, he was calm and unflappable when it mattered most, under fire. As the 3 platoons of Company A enter Remagen, they brace themselves for the bloody fight needed to take yet another town. Burrows' men spearhead the assault.
I told them, I predict a quick reaction to this, so hold on to your helmets.
Fighting in a built-up area, or fibula. It's a dangerous procedure, and the enemy are waiting for you.
In training, GIs were issued with a field manual entitled Attack on a Fortified Position and Combat in Towns. It taught the basic factors of urban warfare, based on the bitter learning curve of fighting highly skilled German troops already experienced in fibula tactics. The GIs learned how booby traps were often placed in doorways. When crossing streets under fire, spread out and keep tight to buildings. Different methods of entry, how to clear houses by coming in through the roof and working systematically downward. Working with tanks, sending them forward to take out enemy positions and provide fire support. Squads were trained how to fight with a variety of weapons in a confined area, combining small arms with machine guns, mortars, bazookas, and artillery. One of the biggest fears for soldiers operating in an urban environment was sniper fire.
The rubbly town of Remagen is perfect for German snipers. They can just dig in and wait for Allied soldiers to walk into their kill zone.
Armed with a well-made rifle, even ordinary German foot soldiers could be sure shots.
This is the KAR-98 Mauser. It was a German infantry weapon. It was based on World War I technology, but used in World War II, and also had sniper capabilities. It was robust, resilient, and easy to use. It was bolt action. It would fire a 7.92 round. It had great stopping power.
Taking Remagen would be slow, painful, and extremely dangerous. As Burroughs' 2nd Platoon worked their way through the center of town, all seems quiet.
Many people had white flags out already. None of them seemed happy. Many of them wept.
The men are pushing deeper and deeper into town. On the right flank is Maverick veteran Sergeant Mike Chinchar's platoon.
We were supposed to go down into town on foot, one platoon at a time.
To confuse, bypass, and isolate German positions, squads of GIs each take a different route through the narrow streets. But the hunters are being hunted. Chinchar, the battle-hardened street fighter, is now within a German sniper's sights.
I think I got him. I said, who? I was told a German. He was gonna shoot you.
In the city square, Burroughs' men, spearheading the assault, suddenly find themselves pinned down. One German machine gunner across the square is holding up the whole advance. From this position, he dominates any Americans down in the square. His machine gun is in a perfect fire position and is able to spit out 900 rounds a minute.
The MG-34, the German general-purpose machine gun. The Allies simply knew it as the Spandau. It really was a super piece of kit. It fired this, a 7.92 round, at a pretty reasonable rate. The MG-34 had a very distinctive, circular, perforated air-cooled barrel.
It's one of these weapons that now compromises Company A's advance through Remagen. Using a classic urban warfare tactic, the Americans send for armor. 10 brand new Pershing M26 heavy tanks have just been assigned to the 9th Armored Division. The M26 General Pershing was the first and greatest U.S. heavy tank to be introduced to the World War II theater. At 90 millimeters, it had the largest American tank gun in the field. It not only superseded the best German tanks' firepower, it was more agile. It had a top speed of 20 miles an hour, and in addition to its 90 millimeter cannon, it was also equipped with one 50 caliber and two 30 caliber Browning machine guns. The 9th received 10 of these special tanks just before the attack on Remagen. Burroughs' men are still pinned down by a German with an MG-34 when two Pershings turn the corner into the main square and set about their business. With a well-placed round from the 90 millimeter gun, the position is obliterated. Backed by the tank's enormous firepower, resistance in Remagen quickly melts away, and a path to the Ludendorff is now clear. The tanks move up to secure the bridgehead. As As the Americans approach, the Germans are in a frantic rush to blow the bridge. Adding to their pressure, a new commander has just arrived. As the 9th Armored rolled into town on the morning of March 7th, a Major Hans Scheller takes command of the German defenses.
The German commander was in a no-win situation.
He was faced with two conflicting orders. A massive pressure to keep the Ludendorff open to allow for the retreat of the 67 Corps, who were still on the west bank of the Rhine. But he also needed to blow the bridge
to stop the Allies from taking it.
When the Americans appear on their doorstep, Major Scheller's subordinate Captain Friesenhahn hits the panic button. And blows a hole 30 feet wide on the western approach to the bridge. It stops the American tanks dead in their tracks. The Allied armor is denied the bridge and will have to find another way across the Rhine. Second Lieutenant Timberman and the men from A Company have taken the town of Remagen and secured the bridgehead. Both their mission and the day's work is done.
I told the men, we'll get some hot meals and shack up here for a couple of days.
Until Timberman and his men found the bridge intact, the commanders had originally planned for the 27th Armored Infantry to make their way south over the next few days and hook up with General Patton's army near Koblenz. They are just tiny pawns in the bigger picture of a global war. After months of winter stalemate and German counterattack, a renewed Allied effort to take the war to the Reich began in earnest in the spring of 1945.
The question that Eisenhower and the rest of the Allied commanders had to figure out was, where were they going to focus their efforts on crossing the Rhine River? And what Eisenhower decided was that it was going to be the British, led by General Bernard Montgomery, who would cross the Rhine up in the north. In the south, the American army, carrying out something called Operation Lumberjack, would make its way up to the west bank of the Rhine and then stop.
They were tasked with mopping up the German army still trapped on the west bank. As all the German bridges had been wired with explosives, the idea was to build pontoon bridges and push thousands of men over the river that way. Once the British force had gotten a foothold in Germany, the rest of the American forces would cross the Rhine and swing northeast to follow the British path to victory. But the construction of floating bridges would take time and likely to happen under enemy fire. Therefore, heavy casualties were expected. So, when in the midst of battle, the Ludendorff Bridge presented itself intact, General Hogue of the 9th Armored Division sees an opportunity to get the Americans over the Rhine ahead of schedule. Furthermore, General Hogue has just got some intel gleaned from a POW. It tells him that the Germans plan to blow the bridge at 1600 hours in just 45 minutes' time. Hogue issues a new set of orders. His men must take the bridge immediately. But how? The Germans have blown a massive hole in the road the tanks can't cross. It will be down to Timmerman and his GIs to take it on foot.
I told him, what if the bridge blows up in my face?
The cold calculation of high command is that taking the bridge is worth risking a company of men for. Timmerman's men happen to be in the wrong place at the right time. Timmerman's Company A of the 27th Armored Infantry are low down on the totem pole of the U.S. Army. Activated at Fort Riley, Kansas on the 15th of July, 1942, they were the foot soldiers of the 9th Armored Infantry Division.
They were actually an ordinary army unit. They weren't a special force. They weren't an elite group. They were just an ordinary group of soldiers who were sent to capture the bridge because they were there.
Made up of 10,754 men, 245 tanks, 72 artillery pieces, the 9th was organized to form missions that required great mobility and firepower.
The other fascinating thing about the whole 9th Division, of which the 27th was a part, was that it distinguished itself during the Battle of the Bulge. In fact, they had taken so many casualties that the Germans announced not once, but twice, that the entire division had been destroyed. The men of the division, showing some sense of humor, started calling themselves the Phantom Division as a result.
Timberman receives a rudimentary plan of attack.
Put white phosphorus and smoke around the area, cover the advance with tanks and machine guns.
The stranded tanks are to pound the defenses on the far side. A barrage of smoke will blind the enemy while Company A storms the structure. They have to neutralize the defenses before the Germans blow the main explosives.
There's an old saying in the army, if all else fails, throw bags of smoke and head straight up the middle. Timmerman's men had no other option. This was an incredibly gutsy move.
What General Hogue doesn't know is that the Germans on the other side of the river want to blow the bridge now, and don't intend to wait until 1600 hours. In order to set off the main charges, they're required to get written authority from their new commander. But Major Scheller, still hoping to keep the bridge open for retreating German troops, refuses. Until they get that order, the Germans need to keep Timmerman and his men off the bridge. Besides multiple anti-aircraft positions around its base, there are further batteries on top of the Erpler Lay, the 600-foot-tall cliffs that give the Germans a commanding view over the battlefield below. The bridge itself is a fortress. 4 heavy stone towers, effectively castle turrets, dominate either end. Each is 3 stories high with gun embrasures on every level, providing deadly fields of fire down the whole length of the structure. In theory, the 160 Germans dug in to defend the Ludendorff have an almost impregnable defensive position.
In military doctrine, it's easier to defend rather than to attack. As a rule of thumb, you need twice as many troops to take a position than to hold it.
Crossing the bridge was insanely dangerous. The Germans had wired it to blow up. There were explosives everywhere. There were defenders on the other side of the river shooting at the Americans. They could be in the middle of the bridge when the entire thing blew up underneath them.
The 1,000-foot bridge was designed with self-destruction in mind. The brainwave of General Erich Ludendorff, it was built in the middle of the First World War to supply men, supplies, and ammunition to the Western Front. But should the front line collapse, it had to be kept from falling into enemy hands. The Ludendorff, a 1,069-foot-long steel bridge, consisted of a central steel arch flanked by 2 trusses. 2 circuits were designed to take out the bridge. The primary circuit consisted of 60 demolition charges, each containing up to 8 pounds of explosives, strung underneath a railroad track. The secondary linked to 440 pounds of explosives crammed into an inspection shaft under the main west pier, and 2 similar 660-pound packages under the eastern pier. If the explosives detonated according to plan, the entire bridge would crash down into the river below. Should these main circuits fail, there was a backup. A primer cord attached to the massive charges under the eastern pier could be triggered by manually lighting a fuse. The U.S. tanks approach the bridge and immediately come under fire from the flak positions. The tanks' big guns take aim. The Pershing's 90mm gun is designed to kill enemy tanks well over a mile away. The German battery on the other side of the river is just half this distance. The Pershings get to work at what is effectively point-blank range. Then a train, possibly carrying men and arms, appears in the tanker's crosshairs.
It had scarcely gotten underway when the first round from Sergeant Schaefer's tank ripped into it at a vital point, immobilizing it.
The German batteries on the far bank had been taken out. Major Scheller decides that he must blow the bridge early. He reluctantly gives the order, effectively abandoning any German forces still left on the Remagen side of the river. German Captain Friesenhahn turns the key to trigger the charges. Nothing happens. He tries again. And again. The main circuits have failed, but there's still the backup system. At the same time, Timberman prepares to cross the bridge. At his side is Sergeant Joseph A. Delisio. Hailing from the Bronx, New York, the scrappy, tenacious 26-year-old citizen soldier commanded the 3rd Platoon.
I believe I had the best men in the Army, and the best fighting platoon within the Army at that time. We go to heaven for each other.
On the other side of the river, a German corporal volunteers to return to the bridge and set off the backup system for the demolition charges. Unaware, Company A are now committed to the assault.
I said, all right, we're going to cross this bridge before...
A huge explosion engulfs the bridge.
We actively saw the bridge lift off its foundation. There was dust and debris blown over, and after a while, you couldn't see the bridge anymore. It wasn't too long, and the dust cleared.
I said, look, she's still standing.
The backup system has fired, but the consequent explosion has failed to bring down the eastern tower. We asked an explosives expert to investigate why the bridge failed to collapse.
It looks like what happened is that the Germans, when they were going to blow up the Remagen Bridge, were supplied an explosive called Donnerite, which is actually an ammonium nitrate-based fuel, which is quite a low velocity explosive, not really ideal for attacking steel targets.
With German supplies running short and the bulk of their forces in retreat, resources were running low. Instead of military-grade munitions, the defenders of the Ludendorff Bridge were lumbered with inferior industrial-grade explosives.
So what we've got is something that we can nearest sort of representation that we can easily lay our hands on of Donnerite, and what we'll do is we will just fire a quantity of it against this steel plate, which is our little representation of the Remagen Bridge, and then after that we might do an experiment with a military-grade explosive to see how that will affect the steel.
3, 2, 1.
Right, this is our military-grade explosive. So what we're going to do is exactly the same experiment. We're going to put approximately the same quantity on another steel plate, put a detonator in it, fire it off, and see what effect that has. Well, you can see the result. That's our Donnerite, which has made a dent in our plate. Then you can have a look at the military explosive, which has put a hole straight through it. And you can see it's, I wasn't even thinking about not going through it. It's absolutely murdered it.
But despite the inferior quality of the explosives, there are still hundreds of pounds of unexploded charges strung along the length of the bridge. They may not be so lucky next time. If the Germans can repair the main electric circuit, or if shrapnel or even a stray round hits one of the charges, the whole bridge could still come down. Despite knowing the terrific dangers that lay ahead, Timberman urges his men on again.
I told the men, all right, we're going across order of march. 1st platoon, 3rd platoon, and then 2nd platoon.
Chinchar and his men check each of the towers on the near side of the bridge. Satisfied they're clear, they continue their advance.
I don't remember touching the boards. I thought I flew across there.
Timberman, knowing that speed is the key to their success, leads by example and drives the men on.
Follow me!
Luck plays a big part in war. But luck does not win battles alone. It takes tactics and courage. When rushing a bridge, it's virtually impossible to zigzag, so you have to keep to the sides, using the structure itself to provide cover. Above all, avoid the middle and just keep moving. You stop, you die.
The next men on the bridge are Delisio and his platoon.
As we started across, the only thing that was in my mind was to get off that bridge. The Germans had attempted once to blow it, and it failed. And we felt sure, or I felt sure, that the bridge would go.
Looking for more explosive charges, engineers follow Timberman onto the bridge. First Lieutenant Hugh Mott and his trusty sergeants Eugene Dorland and John Reynolds must rely on Timmerman's men for cover as they attempt to reach and defuse all the explosives on the bridge. Just as the men reach the point of no return, the machine guns in the towers open up a deadly hail of fire. Then they are ambushed by a hidden threat. German snipers in a sunken barge 200 yards upstream.
They had machine gun fire coming straight down the bridge and sniper fire coming across it. The GIs are now caught in a deadly crossfire from in front and enfiladed from behind on the right flank. They were exposed.
Timmerman's men are pinned down. They haven't even made it halfway across. At any moment, the Germans could try and blow the bridge. Again. Caught in a crossfire, the GIs have nowhere to hide.
The expression enfilade fire from a defilade position basically means you're firing at someone's flanks from a position of cover.
Their only option is to eliminate each German position one by one. Through the use of close fire support from the tanks, the MG positions in the towers would be reduced by the Pershings. Then the infantry could advance and clear the towers room by room. But first, they must eliminate the deadly sniper threat.
In this instance, the snipers were open. They were on a barge and had no cover whatsoever.
So Timmerman calls on a Sherman tank positioned on the approach ramp and tells him to take out the snipers on the barge. In addition to the Pershings, the company has 9 Sherman tanks. It was relatively fast with a top speed of 29 miles an hour. The Sherman was one of the first and the most common US-built tanks to see action in the war. It was mounted with a turret that gave the gunner a 360-degree view of the battlefield. Its standard 75mm gun was lethally efficient against infantry and light armor. And it had an effective range of up to 2,000 yards. The Sherman's guns rip into the barge, and in short order, that threat is ended. As they cross the halfway point of the bridge, the German machine gunners in the towers have a cleaner line of fire. The GIs are now prey to the German MG-42 and its fearsome firepower.
The MG-42, the German general-purpose machine gun. This is a really impressive weapon and a real weapon of fear for the Allies. You could tell the difference between this and the MG-34 by its square barrel. It had a murderous rate of fire at 1,500 rounds a minute. We'll gobble this lot up in under 2 seconds. The MG-42 used this, a 7.92 round, with an effective distance of about 1,200 yards.
The men are pinned down and still have 500 feet left to go. If the GIs are to get across the Ludendorff Bridge, they will need the Pershing's big guns to suppress the MGs in the towers ahead. One tank takes careful aim. His first shell smashes into the left-hand tower on the far side. The tank has silenced the threat. Back on the bridge, the engineers get to work on the remaining explosives. They are in a desperate race against time to dump them into the Rhine before the bridge and everyone on it is obliterated.
It was a close-run thing. As the American forces worked their way across the bridge, they were trying to find and disarm explosives. And one of the Americans remembers seeing a lieutenant of the engineers cutting wires and punting explosives into the river below him.
As the men try to advance, Germans in the towers regroup and open up again. But equipped mostly with the standard carbine rifle, the GIs can offer little effective reply.
The M1 carbine, the United States semi-automatic rifle. The advantage of this weapon is its lightness. It feels really well balanced in your hand, and if I was going on a long trek across muddy fields, this is the weapon I'd want. It takes a specialized 7.62 cartridge and carries 15 in its magazine. On the downside, the 7.62 cartridge has an effective range of about 100 yards. And that really isn't very good for an infantry on the front line.
Now that the Germans are just within range of the GI's rifles, they can provide their own cover and advance more rapidly.
I said, Joe, get your platoon up there and get these men off their tail.
I told my men, if this bridge blows up, we've got a whole battalion on it. Let's get off. Come on, guys. We tried to move as fast as we possibly could.
Joe Delisio took that responsibility and led the charge from the front on the towers.
Somebody yelled, "Who has the right tower?" I looked over my shoulder, and I didn't see anybody move. So I moved over to the right tower. I pushed the door in, and there were 5 Germans huddled around the machine gun, and apparently the gun had jammed, and they were trying to unjam it. I fired a couple of shots and yelled, "Handy halt," which in English means hands up. That was about the only German I knew. They spun around and threw their hands up in the air. I took their machine gun and I threw it out the aperture of the tower. Using the 5 as a shield, we started to move up the steps to the 2nd floor of the tower. But when we got up there, I found 2 men. The lieutenant made a dive for the corner of the tower. I fired 2 shots in front of him, and he stopped. I don't know what he was diving for. I never stopped to check. All I wanted to do was get off that bridge.
Delisio then takes the Germans prisoner. At the same time, Chinchar's platoon storms the tower on the left-hand side. Upstairs, they capture 1 German machine gunner. The threat from the towers is over. As the Germans begin to mount their attack, First Lieutenant Mott of the engineers finds a piece of metal tubing. They believe it carries the cable that leads to the primary charges designed to demolish the bridge. With men still on the bridge, Mott acts fast. He aims his M1 carbine at the cable, and with 3 rounds renders it and the charges useless. Despite the massive firepower raining down on them, no GI so far has been killed trying to take the bridge. But as they storm the east bank, they are not out of danger yet. Now, they must clear the railroad tunnel. No one knows how many Germans are hiding in there and what weapons they might be holding. Timberman once again sends in Delisio, who uses bunker clearing tactics.
Sergeant Cripps and I advanced towards it, and we each took a hand grenade and threw it into the tunnel.
After the shock comes the awe. They advance into the tunnel, firing their weapons into the dark corners.
There was a curve in the tunnel, and we heard many voices talking and yelling and everything else. We didn't know if they were German soldiers or German civilians.
The tactics produce the desired result. German troops and terrified civilians start to stream out of the tunnel. Appointed that morning to command the Remagen defenses, Major Hans Scheller had mounted a bicycle as the Americans crossed the Rhine and slipped out the back of the railroad tunnel. The bridge has been taken, and its official defenders have surrendered. But now the GIs must hang on to their vulnerable bridgehead. The Germans' layered defense means they can still mount a counterattack from the flak positions on the heights above. Men from Company B are first up the 600-foot northwest slope of Erpler Lay. Then, 2nd Lieutenant Burrows and the men from 2nd Platoon follow and begin their ascent under fire.
Taking Remagen and crossing the bridge were a breeze compared with climbing that hill.
Halfway up, they're pounded by 20mm anti-aircraft shells, and casualties quickly mount. Sergeant Bill Schultz is hit through the leg, and Frank Marek is struck by shrapnel. They scramble for cover, but as the men try to make their way to the top, they come across a grisly sight. An entire squad of men from Company B have been wiped out by cannon fire. Burrows' platoon know they will be next. They must get out of the arc of fire and fast, either by finding dead ground or cover, but neither's available. Instead, they have just one option: to rush the heights. When they get there, their risk is rewarded. The enemy has abandoned the fight. The news reaches a delighted General Dwight D. Eisenhower. It leads the Supreme Allied Commander to change his entire battle plan. Eisenhower directs his commanders to drive at least 5 divisions across the captured bridge as soon as possible. But for his new plan to succeed, the men on the ground must secure the bridgehead against anything the enemy might throw at them. If the Americans can create a defensive perimeter, they can gradually expand their bridgehead and then use it as a jumping-off point for the push into Germany. In Berlin, Hitler hears about the loss of the bridge and is incandescent. He personally orders all available troops to the Remagen bridgehead to annihilate the Americans. Just after midnight, the first Sherman tanks crossed the Rhine.
All roads led to Remagen those few days, when a quick end to the war was in bounds. Every type of vehicle crowded the roads, and the fields were thick with pounding artillery, ready tanks and ack-ack guns, most of them waiting to get on the small bridgehead.
8,000 men crossed the bridge in the first 24 hours. Once across, they pushed north, and by nightfall on the 8th of March, the German town of Unkel had been captured. The Germans rush hundreds of artillery pieces in. Together, between March 8th and 9th, they fire an estimated 3,000 shells at the bridgehead. They send in one of the biggest guns they have, the concrete-busting Karl 540mm super heavy mortar. It reportedly fires 11 rounds, but they all miss the bridge. And then it breaks down. The Germans also shoot Nebelwerfers at the masses of men now trying to cross the bridge. It is now an arms race. The Allies rush 5 battalions to defend the Remagen bridgehead. 672 anti-aircraft guns are positioned around the bridge. It's the densest concentration of Allied artillery ever amassed. But they need every gun available because the Germans are throwing their whole arsenal at the bridge. The first Luftwaffe attack comes at 16:45 hours on March 8th. 3 Stuka dive bombers and 1 Focke-Wulf 190 are mere trailblazers for a relentless wave of German air attacks that will follow over the next 2 days.
Jerry planes of all types made pass after pass at the bridge in an effort to halt the troops moving into the bridgehead.
But the German pilots make a big mistake.
They were coming up the river, which made it a smaller target. And that's where all the anti-aircraft guns were on either side. So they nailed them before they could hit the bridge.
Then suddenly, the anti-aircraft crew sights something unusual.
I looked up, and I saw German airplanes flying over trying to attack the Remagen bridge. And suddenly, one airplane was going about 2 or 3 times as fast as any of the others.
Hitler had sent one of his top-secret new deadly wonder weapons to take the bridge down. The world's first jet bomber, the Arado 234B2, screams in to attack the Ludendorff railway bridge. Mounted on bomb racks beneath the wings and fuselage of the plane, it could carry 1 3,000-pound bomb or 3 1,100-pound bombs. But it also tries and fails. March 12th would be the heaviest day for air assaults. Some 91 German planes attack, coming in wave after wave. But the Allies' AAA has by now found their range and begin to wrest control of the air above the Ludendorff Bridge from the enemy. That day alone, the Allies claimed 26 enemy aircraft destroyed and 9 damaged. As the Allies pour more and more men and resources into the Remagen bridgehead, retaking the bridge is now looking like a lost cause for the Germans. Nonetheless, Hitler has one more card to play. On the Fuhrer's personal orders, they launch the ultimate superweapon at the men defending the bridge. The V2 rocket, or Vengeance Weapon 2. The first ever ballistic missile was on its way to Remagen Bridge. It was capable of delivering a 1-ton payload 5.5 minutes later on targets 200 miles away. And it could blow a crater about 33 feet deep and 50 feet wide. Hitler's new weapons of mass destruction really were the stuff of science fiction.
I can't imagine what it was like to see that thing come spiraling in nearly from outer space towards the Rhine River.
Between March 11th and 17th, 11 V2s are launched from bases in Holland and aimed at the bridge across the Rhine.
The V2 wasn't accurate enough, and it actually ended up completely missing, but it's a remarkable statement about how desperate they were.
For 10 days, the Americans successfully pushed tens of thousands of troops across the bridge. Hundreds of U.S. Army engineers under constant enemy attack have swarmed over the crippled structure, desperately applying running repairs to keep it open. Lieutenant Colonel Clayton Rust is on the bridge when the structure starts to groan.
I heard a rivet shearing off, followed by a trembling sensation of the whole deck. Quickly glancing down the deck, the whole deck seemed to be vibrating, and dust was coming off the surface. I knew instantly that the bridge was collapsing.
Sadly, 32 engineers were killed, and 63 men were injured by the bridge collapse. Despite the tragedy, the fact that the bridge was held open for 10 days allowed some 25,000 troops to cross the Rhine and push into Germany from the ever-expanding bridgehead. And Company A of the 27th Infantry took the bridge without suffering a single fatality. Major Scheller, The German officer who abandoned the bridge and escaped by bicycle was, by Hitler's order, shot by firing squad.
I think the capture of the bridge was really when both sides realized that the end of the war was near. It meant there was nothing left guarding the Germans against the Allied attack.
6 weeks later, Hitler commits suicide in his bunker in Berlin, and victory in Europe is won.
I do think the most impressive part of capturing the bridge was not the actual capture of the bridge, it was who did it. 27th Armored Infantry Battalion were ordinary soldiers in an ordinary unit, part of an ordinary division, part of the regular army. They only got the job because they were the closest ones and the only ones who could do it. But these ordinary soldiers, these ordinary men, did an amazing thing.
After the war, President Dwight D. Eisenhower thanked the 27th publicly.
The action of the people was beyond praise. Every man in the whole command approaching that bridge knew that it was mine. Yet without a moment's hesitation, they rushed the bridge. We had losses, true, but they were minor as compared to the great prize that we won.
Second Lieutenant Carl Timmerman would more than make up for the tragic legacy of his father, who had deserted the U.S. Army. He was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his gallant deeds at Remagen. Carl Timmerman went on to serve in Korea and survived combat in both wars. The plucky Sergeant Joe D'Alicio, who single-handedly took out the machine gun nest in the far tower, was also awarded the Distinguished Service Cross.
To us at the time, it was just another job. It was an objective that had to be taken, and we went ahead and took it to the best of our ability. Maybe the higher-ups figured it had importance. It was just a job that had to be done, and we done it.